You're back with coverage of the college football playoff quarterfinals, starting out with the game on Tuesday between Penn State and Boise State. Let's just put it like this. The game plan for Penn State, knowing that defense was their strength, going up against a team led by a very great running back in Ashton Jeanty, who had a historically great season, having more rushing yards than 113 different FBS teams, only needed around 132 yards to break Barry Sanders' all-time single season rushing record. That guy you're going up against with your strong defense. The game plan was to force Maddox Madsen to place the game in his own hands and go out and win the game for Boise State in this one. They could not allow Ashton Jeanty to get going at all. And honestly, off the rip, that's exactly what was going to happen. They would try at will on the very first drive to get Ashton Jeanty going, but it was for relatively short yardage. They had to resort to other means, forcing Maddox Madsen to complete some pretty solid passes, and then even settle for throwing it out of the backfield to Ashton Jeanty before stalling out and being forced to attempt a field goal, which the kicker ended up missing. That would be a theme for Boise State's day. As far as Penn State goes, they would end up getting the ball back, and naturally they would start to just grind the ball down the field with the help of Katron Allen mostly, though Nick Singleton did get some rushes in. Another theme for the day is that they were just unable, for whatever reason, to truly account for Tyler Warren in the way that they should have. You know that even with Singleton and Allen being a good running back duo, you know their main and sometimes only offensive weapon is Tyler Warren, the Mackey Award winner, probably the best tight end prospect in this current FBS season that they have to offer. There's no way that you're leaving him with open space to work with. Surely enough, that would happen on this play as he would get a touchdown from 11 yards out to give Penn State the lead and the very first score of the game. So it's more of the same for the Broncos on this next drive as they continue to try and feed Jeanty. But the second that he was tackled for loss, they were immediately behind schedule and they could not bear to make anything happen from there. A declined penalty led to a sack on third down by the Penn State defense to get them the ball back on a routine 3-and-out. As much as the offense for Penn State would try to grind it out and be sure to control the time of possession in full, they were able to, for whatever reason, get Drew Aller to deliver a hell of a pass to Amari Evans from 38 yards out for yet another touchdown to bring them up 14-0. Then we have some chaos as on back-to-back possessions, you would have fumbles from both sides as Ashton Jeanty would give the ball up to Wheatley after having it forced out by Kobe King. Then on the subsequent PSU possession, you would have the just absolute weird decision by Drew Aller to go ahead and run the football for some reason on a read option. He would lose it, and Oladipo would recover it. You'd think that Boise State would be able to make something out of that, and still, the defense was putting on enough of a masterclass on Ashton Jeanty specifically. Like, they picked up a first down on a Maddox Madsen pass, but they were just not able to get Ashton Jeanty going in this one. Boise State's defense held strong and prevented any sort of momentum on their next possession, though. Things would start to fare a little better for Ashton Jeanty as he would, again, have to resort to being utilized in the receiving game, picking up an 18-yard catch after, being in the middle of a couple of 6-yard runs. Now, he would fumble again. He had fumbled twice all season, and it fumbled twice in just under two full quarters of play. They would sub him out for backup running backs and fullbacks over the course of the next few plays. And Crow, their backup running back, who had been there for quite some time, ended up getting in the end zone on a 3rd and 2 play from the 8-yard line to cut the lead down to 7. The teams would trade punts back and forth before the Penn State team ultimately settled for a field goal from 40 yards out. They would get the ball to start out the second half with a chance to absolutely stamp their feet down. Instead, it actually seemed like for just a little bit, the defense, or at least most of the defense, started to account for Tyler Warren in the correct way. They would force a 3 and out, and then Maddox Madsen would truly start to activate his full powers, as he would get a great pass to Camper over the middle of the field, before then hitting Caples for the very first time of the night, one of their premier wide receivers this season. Ultimately, on a damn good play fake with Matt Lauder, the tight end, running into the flats uncovered, delivered one of the easiest touchdowns to him you'll ever see in your life. He would score from 53 yards out and cut the lead down to 3 points. Even with that, Penn State got a little, I wouldn't say scared, but let's just say they wanted to tighten up on the offensive end. So they would take out a good portion of time, getting a few solid plays like a K-Tron Allen 23-yard run, but mostly just settling for short gain after short gain before penalties would come into play. And then most of the defense had figured out how to account for Tyler Warren, all except for Boise State's number 0 on defense. On this 3rd and 11 play, Tyler Warren would get the ball and he would absolutely moss the fuck out of that, man. It seemed like he was the one individual, yes, Benefield, this guy, was just getting burned by not even just Warren, but everybody. Everybody got a good piece of that, man. And Tyler Warren naturally was able to take advantage of that. So the lead would be opened up 10. This was quite a weird drive by Boise State. And they absolutely needed something out of this if they were going to continue to compete. This drive took 7 minutes and 34 seconds. And they moved just 39 yards down the field on 13 plays. Again, short gain after short gain, trying to bend or conform to the similar game that Penn State would utilize. The same style of play. It was working for them for just a little bit before they got completely behind schedule after a penalty on what would have been the game, would have been a touchdown, rather. So, naturally, if you're going to be that behind schedule on 3rd and 25, you may feel desperation of some kind. Still, they were on PSU's 36-yard line. Madsen decided to take a shot, and it was promptly intercepted by the Penn State defense. They probably could have settled for something shorter than that. Maybe just get a field goal out of it, but no. They wanted to get very bold, and as a result, the margin of error was even thinner now. They would force Penn State into another 3 and out, and then get another possession. That honestly started out pretty well. I mean, you had a couple of incomplete passes, but then on 3rd down, you had Ashton Genty get one of his longer runs of the night with 26-yard run to reset the downs. They were driving just a little bit, and ultimately they got in good field position as they would be on the 21-yard line for fourth down to potentially kick a field goal to bring it within a single possession. But Dalmas would miss again. I don't even know what to say about these kickers anymore. It's just truly bad. The next possession saw Nick Singleton promptly put the game away with a 58-yard rushing touchdown. That was it. And more desperation will follow. And, Mattis Matson, despite having a decent game, the pressure was completely on at this point. So he would just have to throw fucking balls down the field trying to make something happen. And he would be picked off on both occasions by the Penn State defense. Offense didn't really have to do much of anything else at this point. It was already a 17-point ball game. Boise State didn't really show too many signs of life in this one. And Penn State would come away with the victory 31-14. The Broncos controlled the time of possession, but ultimately, when you really think about it, they forced Boise State to play their brand of football, and they were unsuccessful. It's as simple as that. Trying your best to go up against this team and control the time of possession, control the clock, and also control the trenches against a very good front seven was going to be a hard task to do. And surely enough, they struggled with figuring that out through most of the game, even with the couple of scoring possessions that they had, and with a few runs that Ashton Jeanty had. If you're not going to respond as well with making those plays and then actually just doing your job, whether it be making the field goals, whether it be truly accounting for Tyler Warren on the back end, or even underneath on many occasions, you just don't really stand much of a chance here. 304 passing yards for Maddox Matson with the aforementioned touchdown and 3 overall interceptions. You would look at Ashton Jeanty having 30 carries for 104 yards and 2 fumbles, including 1 lost. And you would say that, he did decent. No, he struggled. He struggled straight up. The Penn State defense had his number all night long. He couldn't go anywhere. He couldn't do anything. And again, that 26-yard run didn't really do anything. The game was mostly out of reach at that point of time. He was playing far unlike himself. But again, it made sense. Again, Oregon is a good team, and they have a decent run defense, but Penn State is on an entirely different level when it comes to that regard. So you just have to figure out other ways to score. And ultimately, though they did for just a few drives, wasn't enough. Water would lead all of their receivers with 96 yards and 4 catches with a touchdown. As for Penn State, their rushing game was on point. Even if they didn't win the time of possession, they were able to wear down the defense within those drives to then break off huge runs. They would combine Allen and Singleton for 29 total carries and 221 total yards with a touchdown by Nick Singleton. Both of them had rushes that were over 50 yards. So Allen would have a 50-yarder and Singleton had the aforementioned 58-yard touchdown run. Dreller had 171 passing yards, just 52% completion from the field, and 3 touchdown passes, with Tyler Warren catching 2 of them. Only threw it to 4 wide receivers in this ballgame, but again, that's what it really came down to. And this could be a theme for a good portion of these games in the CFP quarterfinals, to just preface everything. Ball control. Who has the stronger and more effective trenches when it comes to the rushing attack, when it comes to pass protection? Who can do a better job of not even just getting down the field and getting points on the board while taking up a reasonable amount of time, but also making sure that you can protect the ball, win the turnover margin. And when you look at this game right here, Penn State certainly did that. If you can force a team into 4 turnovers while having just a single fumble yourself, naturally you're in the driver's seat. And that is how that game would go. Moving on to the action on Wednesday. Start out with a very, I should say, solid Texas versus Arizona State match, even though early on it didn't seem like it. You would have them extend their first drive after stalling out for a little while, with one of the Texas gunners running into the punter and giving them an automatic first down. A similar theme in this one early on when it came to having control of what the running back was able to do. Cam Skattebo, for the early portion of this game, was not able to do much of anything either. He would have very short runs, and most of them saw him break the first tackle, make the first person miss, but there was always somebody else in the area willing to come over and put their body on the line to tackle this man. This forced Sam Leavitt into making some pretty erratic decisions. On multiple occasions, he would just try to run straight forward and then try to throw a pass downfield. Couldn't really make up his mind. And it just completely forced them to settle for a field goal, and it got them in a huge rut early on. I mean, within just a couple of plays when Texas got the ball back, you had Quinn Ewers delivering a dime to Matthew Golden, and then you had him deliver another dime to DeAndre Moore Jr. for a 23-yard touchdown. Then, on the very next drive, you would have Sam Leavitt being once more irrational. He was trying to scramble out and even made a pirouette or so to just settle for another incomplete pass. They would have to punt the ball, where Slade Bolden would get a 75-yard punt return for touchdown. Now, neither offense would do much of anything. Texas's defense remained stout, and Arizona State's defense started to at least show some resistance. They still would need offensive help, and ultimately they would not get it, as on multiple possessions in this second quarter alone, you would have some progress being made with some decent Skattebo runs and some decent passes by Leavitt to guys like Xavier Guillory. But when push came to shove, they would settle for a predictable 4th down play, like a Cam Skattebo dive, and it got stuffed in the backfield, giving Texas the ball right back and allowing them to take off 6 minutes and settle for a field goal of their own, making it a 2-possession ball game. They would try once again to go for it on 4th down after getting in favorable position with the help of a former Texas tight end in O'Mara for a 23-yard catch. Now, this being a longer fourth down, they would have to pass the football, but ultimately, again, great pressure from Texas's front four would force Sam Levitt to be sacked. Arizona State's defense, credit to them, remained stout, giving the offense yet another chance to make something happen. And they would stall out initially before a 4th and 9 conversion by Blazin Lonawong on a fake punt for 32 yards would extend their drive, bringing it to the 2-minute warning and allowing them to pick up a few more first downs with the help of Sam Levitt and then Xavier Guillory. You would think that with them getting down to the 19-yard line, a 36-yard field goal would be pretty good. But they displayed a stat line, or talked about a stat line that stated that Arizona State kickers on the season were a combined 4 of 12 from 30 yards or more. You're a collegiate level kicker, and you mean to tell me that you can't make a field goal that simple? Naturally, that would become 4 of 13, as this kicker would have his field goal blocked, bringing the halftime period in. Texas would actually get the ball to start out the second half with a chance to extend that lead, and they would not. Arizona State would find themselves once more in favorable position with the help of Amere trying his best to get revenge against his former team, and then Sam Levitt also taking it upon himself to bring in an element of rushing in his game. If Cam Skattebo was going to be clamped up for just a little bit, he needed to display that he could do similar damage and open up more rushing opportunities for Cam Skattebo. And then a couple of plays, they would do their best to get him activated, as he would pick up multiple first downs with a 10-yard catch and then a 14-yard run. But ultimately, he would be stuffed on this 4th and 2. At the very least, it forced Texas to be pinned deep in their own territory, and they would very much take advantage of that, as Simmons of the Arizona State defense would do a great job of taking his helmet and ramming it right through Wisner's hands, forcing a fumble in their own end zone and having Quinn Ewers recover it in the end zone while getting tackled, bringing a safety into play. Texas, with yet another chance to put a touchdown at least on the board, would start off pretty well. They would get Cam Skattebo involved all the way here, and he would ultimately break you loose for a 33-yard run before getting deeper into Texas's red zone and stalling with the help of yet another sack on Sam Levitt from another person named Simmons, this time on Texas's defense. He would make this 36-yard field goal, though, at the very least. So it was a 9-point ball game from there. Texas, when it was looking like they had stalled out for quite some time, and honestly, again, 14 points in just a short amount of time to do relatively nothing after that certainly raises questions. But they would at least mount a touchdown drive here with the help of yet another pass to Matthew Golden for 29 yards. I just got to say that those two, Ewers and Golden, were just locked in the entire game, no matter what was going on. You could bank on them picking up a clutch conversion when they needed it, or having them just combine for an effort that led to an absolutely timely catch. Ewers on 3rd and goal from the 5 would eventually scramble in, as the lane was so open for him to just use his legs. He rarely does it, but it was effective there. This would be a 2-possession ball game. And then shit started to happen. Boy, oh boy, shit started to happen. It would be detailed at some point that Cam Skattebo was actually on the sideline vomiting. I'm not necessarily sure why, but if you look at the early portion of the game, man was taking hit after hit after hit, getting himself completely banged up. And at some point, I guess he started to feel ill, so he was doing that on the sideline. Now, they would try to get him involved at times, bringing him in and out of the ball game. And there were some moments where he absolutely just couldn't do it on that particular play. But they still relied on him heavily. And he, more often than not, managed to come through. He would get some short runs and then be taken out of the game over the course of the next few plays. Before on third down, he would get a 15-yard run to bring them to the 50-yard line. On 3rd and 10, they would get closer to picking up the first down, but were just short. So on 4th down, you want to know what they ended up doing? The play that would start their comeback managed to be a Cam Skattebo pass. And it was actually a pretty good throw. Now, Malik McClain had to come back to the ball a little bit, but it was a very good play call all around. He was free to run the post route in any way that he needed as Taffy got completely out of position, and Skattebo delivered an absolute dime from 42 yards out to get him in the end zone, and they subsequently picked up the 2-point conversion to then make it a one-possession ball game. More favor for Arizona State's defense when they would pick off Quinn Ewers with the help of a good work from their corner in Robinson. Just like that, there was a chance for Arizona State to go on and tie this ball game. And it would start in the nastiest of ways. We know that Cam Skattebo can run the football. He can apparently pass the football as well. But he's also a receiving threat. And this man had the gall to go out wide and try a double move on Jordan Taffy, the same Jordan Taffy that allowed the touchdown. And he cooked him. He blew right past him with an elite double move and picked up 62 yards on that reception to then go along with an additional 9 penalty yards because he drew a face mask penalty. Within just a few more plays, it was all Cam Skattebo from here. He would run for the touchdown and then pick up the 2-point conversion to single-handedly tie up the ball game himself. 16 unanswered points. Then we get the chaos for Texas. In between the midst of these drives, you can argue that there should have been a targeting penalty in Arizona State's favor as, their receiver made the catch, and Taffy, once more, I felt as though it looked like he did lead with the crown of his helmet to make the play on a defenseless wide receiver. There had been a lot of controversy around it. Some people think so. Some people do not believe that it should have been a penalty. But regardless, Texas would be given multiple chances. They would. And Bert Auburn, a very good kicker for them, would actually miss the field goal before that aforementioned drive by Arizona State. Texas would have another chance with 57 seconds left, and they would actually work their way down the field with the help of not just Golden, but also Ryan Wingo. At the end of it, all they wanted to do was get it on the right hash that Auburn preferred to put him in the best possible position to make the kick. They even showed, they panned, rather, to Sarkisian having a sort of pep talk with Auburn, trying to hype him up, being all smiles and trying to motivate him to close out the ball game. The man proceeded to miss the 38-yard field goal this time, and Sarkisian was an absolute shambles. He didn't even have the fullest of reactions. He was just like, okay, that's honestly so tough. The Sun Devils would open up overtime, and they would have the upper hand with Cam Skattebo getting in once more. Then having Texas in a dire situation with their backs against the wall. 4th and 13 from the 28-yard line. This is going to be relatively difficult to pick up. And yet, Ewers found it within himself to get it over the middle in the seams to Matthew Golden once more from 28 yards out, tying up the ball game. And then it led into the second overtime where Texas would start out and allow Quinn Ewers to deliver a pretty easy pass to Gunnar Helm out of the flat for a touchdown, and then successful 2-point conversion to make it an 8-point ball game. Cam Skattebo would start out Arizona State's possession in this period with a solid run, but would then be stymied for just a 2-yard gain on his next attempt. They felt on 3rd and 8 that they needed it all at this point, and so Sam Levitt would throw up a pretty odd pass, which would be picked off by Makuba Sr., and giving Texas the 39-31 win. After, again, a great display and a valiant effort from this Arizona State team. Everybody was counting them out completely, just writing them off as yet another weaker team with a bye that would get knocked off pretty easily. That did not happen. Texas had to fight for their claim to the CFP semifinal. They had to. And it says a lot about a good amount of players on this team, especially Cam Skattebo. Man was dealing with sickness and single-handedly brought them back into the game, then gave them a lead to work with. Arizona State's defense on their part just needed to close, and they did not. It's definitely a tough way to go out, but they can't necessarily leave the college football playoff disappointed. It's something to learn from, I would say. Levitt would have 222 passing yards. 24 of 46 completion isn't necessarily the best, and an interception doesn't help. But again, that coming late, and I mean absolutely late in the ball game. He did a decent job for the most part after having a slow start of his own. He was finding a little bit of a rhythm. Skattebo, again, he led in rushing. He threw the only touchdown pass, and he led in receiving yards and receptions as well. 39 total touches with 284 yards to go along with 3 total touchdowns in this ball game. Meanwhile, for Texas, Quinn Ewers would have 322 yards passing and 3 touchdowns with a pick. Golden would have 149 yards receiving in 7 catches with a touchdown. There should be some cause for concern for Texas if you're going to get out to such a rapid start and then cool down completely to where you allow them to get so far back in the ball game that they then take a lead of their own late in clutch time. Just a thought there. This game between Ohio State and Oregon was very different. They were promoting it the whole time while the game was in overtime. And I'm like, no, the Arizona State in Texas game is going to have priority with it being in overtime, even with that taking place. I get it. You know what I'm saying? I love me some Ohio State. Don't get me wrong, but come on. That being said, start out very, very well. I don't even need to necessarily go in depth here. You've already got some idea of what happened here. If you don't, all you need to know is that I would end up watching most of the rest of the game, despite missing the very first bit of action. And the Buckeyes would dart out to a 34-0 lead. A short pass to Jeremiah Smith, with him breaking out of a couple of tackle attempts to get a 45-yard touchdown to start out of the game. Then another dot over the middle to Emeka Egbuka from 42 yards out. Then another dart deep in the corner to Jeremiah Smith for his second touchdown of the day from 43 yards out. And then a touchdown run of 66 yards from none other than Travion Henderson, who again should very well be one of the top running back prospects in this upcoming NFL draft. He will likely declare after the season is done. I have no doubts about that in my mind. So not only did Ohio State get out to a great, and I mean historically great start offensively. I mean, their 34-point lead, they stated, was the largest deficit that a number one team in the nation had faced since the 2013 BCS National Championship. And we talking just about the CFP quarterfinals here. Oregon, again, they had their own chances to respond, but again, credit to the Ohio State defense as well. They absolutely clamped down. Dillon Gabriel in the first half was only 11 of 19 for 65 yards. And throughout the course of the entire game, especially in this first half, they could not run the ball when they needed to. Jordan James and Noah Whittington, that combination killed Ohio State in the very first matchup and wore them out. That was not going to happen this time. At will, they would try their hardest to pick up a large amount of yardage, but they were stopped either relatively short or they were stopped in the backfield with bodies on bodies from the Ohio State defense flying, swarming over to secure tackles and even lay hits, especially when it comes to Lathan Ransom and Cody Simon also laying down the absolute wood. Just ridiculous, man. That was the story of most of the game. Now, Oregon would mount together possessions, all of them ending with Trayshawn Holden touchdown catches to start out the second half and also end off the first half. Then with another late one in the fourth quarter to try and find some sign of life. Still, at no point did it really feel like Ohio State was going to allow Oregon to come back. Not necessarily. Even if those were relatively sloppy, and it's quite the drop-off for a team that was holding them to absolutely nothing for a good portion of the game to begin with. But the Travion Henderson 8-yard rushing touchdown effectively stopped any slim chance of Oregon's ability to come back in this ball game, and they would eventually win it 41-21. Multiple records will be set with their overall performance as Jeremiah Smith would extend his lead over everyone else after breaking the Big Ten freshman record for touchdowns in a single season. He would finish the game with having 14 on the season overall after having a 7-reception, 187-yard, and 2-touchdown performance in this ball game. It could have been more, and they referenced Jackson Smith and Jigba's Rose Bowl game versus Utah in the 22 season. It was very akin to that. It was looking like he could have done that. He had a good amount of yardage in just the first quarter alone. So it was ridiculous. Ohio State's 4 offensive touchdowns of more than 40 yards were the most in the first half in 20 years. And their 8 sacks were the most in a Rose Bowl game since USC played in 2004. Cody Simon, again, accounted for a good portion of this, along with the help of JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer getting 2 each. But Simon would be given the defensive MVP for the game. Deservedly so. 11 tackles for him to go along with 3 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. And some pass deflections as well, even though he wasn't necessarily credited for them. But he was everywhere. He was giving Dillon Gabriel nightmares. He was out lurking in the zone and nearly got an interception on him early in the ball game. He was swarming over to make tackles on not just the running backs, but also guys like Terrence Ferguson, guys like Tez Johnson deciding to come over the middle. He met them right at the summit and made his move. And he would also have some good audibles time in and time out. Like on a play specifically, it was 3rd down, and they were having Dillon Gabriel attempting to run the football, or he recognized that there was at least a threat of it. So he decided to have the cornerbacks to his left alter their coverage a little bit, and he was going to take on the assignment of spying Dillon Gabriel. He ultimately did a great job of that, sticking with him all the way. And then as everything started to break down, he would try to scramble out. Cody Simon was right there to prevent the damage from reaching a higher point. Well deserved. And Jeremiah Smith got the offensive MVP in this ball game. Though it says something when their rushing game was also intact. Which was, I guess, it was kind of intact in the first one, but they did have their struggles as well. Nonetheless, Judkins and Henderson would combine for 25 total carries and 179 total yards to go along with 2 touchdown runs, both by Henderson. As for Oregon, Dillon Gabriel would have 299 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, tying Case Keenum's all-time FBS record for passing touchdowns in a career with 155. And he completed 77% of his passes, though again, a lot of this came with the sheer fact of just having the volume to accomplish such feats. Their rushing attack. Just think about this. Now, yes. Quarterback sacks do count as negative rushing yards. I understand that. But even when you shred off all of that, the other rushers for Oregon squad would have a combined 16 carries and just 20 total yards, picking up less than a full yard per play. And when you factor in the amount of times that Dillon Gabriel lost yardage, they had 28 total carries for negative 23 total yards. Negative 0.8 yards a carry. Boxed up this time. Trayshawn Holden, again, credit to him, would have 2 touchdown passes. Well, 2 touchdown catches here. And 116 receiving yards on 7 catches. So again, a very great performance by Ohio State, especially early on. An unexpected performance for Oregon, really, seeing as they were the top team in the nation, only undefeated team in the nation at this point, and they had a bye. But again, as well too, and this was the case for a good portion of the teams that had their bye. It's true for the next game as well. They would start off a little rusty. It was going to be natural if you're taking a couple of weeks off in between your last football snap. It's kind of natural. But, especially when it came to Oregon, they absolutely could not overcome that. And Ohio State will continue to at least attempt to have these performances against the likes of Texas, who they will play on January 10th. It should be a fun game. I don't know if I can necessarily sit here and tell you that they're going to just completely do away with Texas like they have Tennessee and Oregon now to this point, though some other people will say that. But again, the way they're looking, could it really be a surprise to anybody if that were to happen? Especially with Texas having such a cold streak and having to escape an Arizona State team who was deemed to be an inferior opponent. You never really know. But all of that will remain to be seen. Now, moving on to Notre Dame and Georgia. I preface everything there by shedding some light on what would take place way before it even started. There would be a situation in New Orleans on the well-renowned Bourbon Street that would see deaths to 15 people and injuries to 35 others, in which the assailant would drive a truck through the area and just run over people completely before he would be taken out within the course of a shootout between him and police. It would be deemed an act of terror as the individual would have paraphernalia in the actual truck. They would also find yesterday night that he acted alone in this situation. It's just an unfortunate one all around that you have people who have those just horrible, I guess, horrible thoughts on their mind, I would say. It's definitely just, certainly was rough for the families of all those people to have to hear about that, or maybe even experience it in real time, and just try their absolute hardest to really make sense of something that you may truly not be able to be completely honest. Like, I just really don't know what to say. I mean, rather than have a moment, you're bringing in the new year, so you have a ton of people celebrating that. Rather than try to keep the peace going, I guess, you will have those people that just want to see a bunch of chaos. Definitely just not optimal. Not optimal at all. They would be in such a flux about the situation that they would be forced to actually put the site of the Sugar Bowl on lockdown to make sweeps and ensure that there were no other kinds of weapons or bombs in the area. Everything was sealed off, and after a while it would come out that they would postpone the action from Wednesday night to Thursday afternoon, which was yesterday. Different teams were reported as staying in their own hotels, only going out to the stadium for just a little bit, running light practices, but not doing much more outside of that, just trying to ensure their safety. As it was just a hotbed for that entire period of time, quite frankly. You had that situation just take place. So anything else could really follow. You don't truly know. They would get on with the action tomorrow, not without, of course, accounting for the fact that there were lives lost, and doing their best to pay tribute to all of those individuals, as well as those who would respond to the incident. The first responders, different government officials, different personnel in the city government as well, trying to ensure that the entire area is safe and making sure that their fellow man is also in relatively good condition. After all of that, they would get on with the game, where the goal for both teams were to, once more, control the line of scrimmage, control the time of possession. Quite simple. I mean, it's strength on strength. Both of them have very great front sevens. Both of them have very great offensive lines, usually speaking. Whoever could at least put a dent in one of those strengths would go out and get the victory here. Both of these teams would start out slow on offense, even with it feeling like you could have Georgia succumb to this pressure, as Gunnar Stockton would actually hang in there, doing a good job of getting passes out to the likes of Dylan Bell, who has been a staple of Georgia's offense as a playmaker for years, even with having Arian Smith, the speedster, in there. Trevor Etienne would have a few runs as well, which probably could help them out in terms of winning overall control. But even he, on third and short, would fumble, as Schuler would make a pretty good play on the football, and you would have Notre Dame recover that. They would still not do anything with, though, as they would punt the ball. The teams would then trade field goals after Gunnar Stockton completed a pretty solid pass over the top to Arian Smith, finally utilizing him as a speedster. Then, for Notre Dame, you would have Riley Leonard taking it upon himself, quite frankly. Jordan Faison would get some action, but you would have him and Jadarian Price trading runs, including a run by him that went for 32 yards before Mitch Jeter would ultimately kick a field goal. It was looking like it would just be a 6-3 ball game after a couple of punts, and then another field goal from Notre Dame after more action from the likes of Faison, from Jaden Thomas, and from Riley Leonard as well. Mitch Jeter would once again give them a 3-point lead before Gunnar Stockton would once again step back to pass, which he had been doing a good job of all game long. But you still gotta have time to do it. And there were still moments where the offensive line would just not help him out, force him under duress, and ultimately that's what happened here. As Tui Halamaka, who was on him all night long due to the lack of protection from the offensive line, would end up recovering a fumble that was forced by the Notre Dame defense, giving them a short field to work with and giving them another score in just a few short seconds to Bo Collins for a 13-3 lead at the end of the half. And then, in another fatal twist, ultimately speaking, their backup receiver and return specialist would actually get a 98-yard touchdown return off of the kickoff to increase the lead to 20-3. Still, they were relatively in it, as when we go into Notre Dame's offense and we look into the amount of drives that they had, if they were in their own territory and not starting off in plus territory, they were not typically doing much of anything, despite a Georgia punt that would remain the same. Jeremiah Love would get a 2-yard run, but they would stall out and give Georgia the ball back. Gunnar Stockton would put together his finest drive after getting a couple of completed passes, and then ultimately delivering a pretty good pass in the flats to Cash Jones, who would bring it in for a 32-yard touchdown. Both teams would then turn the ball over on downs as Riley Leonard would be stopped short on his, and then Gunnar Stockton, after multiple penalties, forced them to then initially settle for a punt and then ultimately try fourth down again after Notre Dame was called for delay a game. They would try a pass where he would complete it, but it was so off target because you would have him facing pressure. You had to literally throw it off of his back foot. No quarterback can truly succeed in that situation if you're going to be under that much pressure. And this is his first career start. He's still trying his best to make do with it, and it's still not enough. Ultimately, Notre Dame could just do whatever they wanted from here. Run after run after run by both receiver and running back. Got them their final score of the night with a field goal. And then Georgia, after a few solid runs, would ultimately turn the ball over on downs inside Notre Dame's red zone. From there, they took 7 minutes and 36 seconds off the clock while gaining just 41 yards on their drive. And the game was over from there. Gunnar Stockton would be sacked yet again to force a turnover on downs, but it really wouldn't have mattered because at the end of it, with the few mistakes that Georgia made and the fact that they could not at any point of time win their matchups, they lost this one pretty easily. Like, they completely controlled the line of scrimmage when you look at their rushing attack compared to Georgia's, as they tallied 154 total yards on the ground with 4.2 yards a rush, whereas Georgia only picked up 62 yards on 2.1 yards a rush. Just a little more of an effort there, and Notre Dame had the full edge. They had more time of possession. Despite running the same amount of plays, they had more chances at third down, and they did not turn the ball over at all. Even if they could have done more offensively, everything went in their favor. And thus, they came away with the 23-10 victory. Riley Leonard would combine for 170 total yards and a touchdown pass, with Jordan Faison leading all Notre Dame wide receivers with 4 receptions and 46 yards. For Georgia, Stockton would have 234 yards passing and a touchdown on 62.5% completion. That's not terrible at all. But again, when you're going to be made one-dimensional, and then you can't even have that offensive line playing to their strengths, which, keep in mind, they put on a graphic saying that they had a sizable advantage in terms of height compared to Notre Dame's front seven, and also in terms of weight, they were on average 317 pounds, around 48 pounds heavier. And yet, at every moment, they were able to, especially with Tuli Halamaka, getting Ben in the backfield with a great balance of power and speed to completely offset any of that particular disadvantage. So that would do it for the college football playoff quarterfinal, where it was safe to say that Arizona State and Texas was likely the best one, and even then it started off relatively slow. Most other games, again, saw teams just dominate, especially when it came to teams with a bye. Every single team that had a bye in this one lost. And I understand that it may, again, taking it back to some of the commentary in the last one, it may feel like some teams were being punished for having a good season, but I don't necessarily know. I can't sit here and say that that was the case. I mean, they were very deserving of buys. I don't necessarily know how people believe that they could just try to penalize teams for it. It's not like that at all. It's a very new system that will need tweaking. This is quite literally a trial run. Even with one of these 4 teams in Notre Dame or Penn State, in Ohio State or Texas, making history by winning this for the first time ever, but with different trends that have happened so far. It does offer the committee a chance to explore and potentially change some guidelines going into the next time. We have to let it run, though. You have to understand that it's just not gonna be perfect. Not at all. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.